what we wanted to really clear up and explain to people, and I owe everyone an apology, not just people who are in this room, but everyone in the greater Cleveland area, and really everyone throughout the country and the world where we have our Safety Town programs. Because so much has happened in such a really short period of time, and since we did not have the funding to hire sufficient personnel to really communicate well, communication lines broke down around the country, but mainly in the greater Cleveland area, and we feel very badly about that. I have no hard feelings towards anyone. It's not anyone's fault. I thought you should know how Safety Town from day one came to where it is today, and that's really what we want to do. And as I said, with the videotaping, we'll be able to maybe splice this and make it available to local communities so they will, if they're interested, have some information. Now, particularly, let's start with the background of Safety Town and then how I became involved with it. For those of you who do not know, Safety Town started in 1937 in Mansfield, Ohio. It was founded by a police officer, and those of you who have the organizational guide and the general information guide from our office know what this man looks like. We have some pictures and the pictures of the first Safety Town. A little girl was, in 1936, was walking to school on her very first day of school and was killed in Mansfield, 1937. And this Superman felt something should be done to taught children how to cross the street to get to and from school safely. And consequently, he set up a few little houses and a traffic light in the back of the school. And as I said, there's a picture in our guidebooks with that. I did not know anything about Safety Town until 1963. Went to this meeting in Lakewood, Ohio, and I asked if there was any information on preschool safe education for children. I wanted it for the nursery school as well as the children in our area. And nobody had anything. Nobody knew of any materials that were available. So one lady after the meeting said to me, you know, you might want to check down in Mansfield, Ohio. They used to have a Safety Town program. And then I said, now this is, you know, what is this Safety Town program? She said, well, it was, you know, this police officer taught children about crossing streets. And then I remembered, having lived in Bedford Heights, I used to go up to Southgate, and I passed this little building things. So I went up to Maple Heights and talked to Ralph Casper and Rita Eitel, who were there, and I said, you know, where do you get information from? And they said, oh, we do our own thing. And they gave me a few sheets of paper, and then I, with that, really organized Bedford Safety Town program. Started in the end of '63. Not knowing, and I had no intentions of directing, I had no intentions of doing anything with the program. I was president of the Bedford Preschool PTA. My husband was a school board member in Bedford. He was on the faculty at Case Western Reserve, and we were very involved in education in the community. We wanted to make a small part in helping the community get better. So we sat down I sat down with the superintendent and did some talking. Now, because we wanted to incorporate the school system, which we thought was best to do, that incorporated 4 communities: Bedford, Bedford Heights, Oakwood, and Walton Hills. I had to meet with 4 police chiefs, 4 fire chiefs, 4 recreation people. We went into a meeting, and not exaggerating, there was this long table and all these men sat around, and one man sat there with his pencil, loud enough that I could hear. And I left that meeting. I was so angry. I said to my husband, I'm going to set up a Safety Town program in this community if I have to do it myself. I was just so mad. This was, as I said, the end of '63. I then, as I said, I had some information from the Maple Heights, and at that time I was aware of the Mansfield, but did not really do anything at that point. We worked with the schools to get the facilities and have the buildings built, and I thought before we do anything else, we really should go down to Mansfield and find out some of this background information on what they're doing. So I took some of the teenagers with me, and in fact 3 of the teenagers to be exact. And we found out that the man who had started Safety Town, Fred Bowles, had passed away in 1958. So I never had the opportunity to meet this extremely, I'm sure, wonderful, wonderful man. And so I wanted to pursue this, and I'm tremendous at research. And I went into the Mansfield newspaper to see if they could find any articles from the past. And again, a few of these we've added into it. And there's a very interesting story about this man. He was not quite tall enough to be a police officer. He'd always wanted to be a police officer, hung around with the police officers. And I guess according to the city ordinances, or whatever their bylaws were, he was 1 inch too short. But he was so persistent that he finally got them to pass that he could be a mounted police officer because he had a horse. And at which time they had no restrictions for height. And that's how he became a police officer, which anyone who had that type of determination, I think, had to be super. My goal, and I've said this to many people around the country, is to someday build a nice monument for this man. We have a picture of his horse and of him that his wife gave us. And someday in Mansfield, Ohio, I would like to have a nice statue built in his honor, because he's just been, I think, super. He was 50 years ahead of time. Anyway, we went on, then came back with really no printed information. We had about 2 or 3 sheets of paper that said, Safety Town, theme of the day is police officers, your friend, and so forth. But having been in education and working with kids, I said, there's got to be more. So, and I didn't know who we were going to have teach the program or whatever. We organized the program. We had registration the first year. We had 450 children registered. And I was involved with the nursery school, and I met with Dr. Brown, and he called me and he said, Dorothy, we have a problem. We had hired Mr. David Earl, who was the driver ed teacher at the high school in Bedford. He was going to teach the program. And he said, Mr. Earl has just called. This is about less than 2 weeks before the first session to start. Mr. Earl is moving out of town. He accepted a position. And he said, you have to teach the program. And I said, I've never taught safety to kids before. I know nursery school. I don't know this. And he said, nobody else knows. You know more about it than we do. He said, his exact words were, it's easier for you to get a teacher for the nursery school than for us to get a Safety Town teacher. So that's what I did. We did popsicle sticks. We did, the milk cartons, everything possible, staying strictly to the traffic concept. And so I went over to Ralph Casper in Bedford, in Maple Heights, and I said, Ralph, what do you do to keep your kids busy? And he said, we play a lot of games. And I said, what kind of games? And he said, Duck, Duck, Goose, and Ring Around the Rosie, and Drop the Handkerchief. And I said, but that's not safety. And he said, yeah, but it keeps them busy. And I thought, something's wrong here. This is not, and I tremendously respect Ralph Casper and everyone else in the previous years who taught. And I have defended him through the years, as you'll hear later on. But I said, there's got to be something wrong with this. So I went back and I said to Dr. Brown, we've got to teach safety education to kids, but I would like to expand this not to traffic to other areas of safety. And he said, quote, unquote, Dorothy, this is your program. You do with it what you want to. Well, listen, in 1964, ladies, this was, I felt I was on cloud 9, somebody telling me this. So I started observing children. My two daughters were 2 and 3.5 at the time. And I basically watched them. And then I started to go out in the community and watch kids. And I'm saying, all right, what do I want to achieve? What is the purpose of Safety Town? What's the objective? As I said, I've always asked why and how come and why are we doing this? What's the evaluation, what kind of research involved with this? And I said, all right, what do we want to achieve as a result of Safety Town? I wanted those kids to better protect themselves right at that age, not just traffic, but from the time they woke up in the morning to the time they went to bed. What is it that we could teach them to help them prevent an accident and save their life right then, not later on? People said, oh, and I heard this later on through the years of Safety Town, that, you're teaching them to be drivers. No, we're not. That's way down the line. And we're not teaching them to be drivers, we're teaching them to be safety-minded citizens, not just safety-minded drivers. You're not going to have the drivers until you have the total safety-minded citizen. As I said, I started observing all the children, and I followed school buses, and watched children how they boarded the bus. And I ran into problems. I said, why do children do this, and why can't they hold on the railing? I met with pediatricians. I met with child psychologists. Why do children do this? All these things started cropping. How does a child look upon a bicycle? Are these children at 4 and 5 ready for bicycles? How do we teach them about strangers? how do we do all these things? So as I said, I just started asking a lot of questions, meeting with people, not just in Cleveland, but all over the country as I traveled. Anyway, as I said, when Dr. Brown said that to me, the end of '64, the winter of '64, the spring of '65, I spent hours and hours rewriting a curriculum which I felt would be geared towards basically a pre-kindergarten child. And that's what all the materials that I've written, the curriculum and all the information is geared in terminology for that pre-kindergarten child, the child who would go to school that fall. And that was my concern, is teach this child as much as possible about going to on the first day of school. I had heard of programs where they were teaching third grade kids how to get on the school bus, how to ride bicycles in third grade. I saw kids in my neighborhood riding bicycles at 5 years of age. And I said, why are you doing it in third grade? This is like giving someone the keys to the car and say, go out and drive and come back in 3 years and I'll teach you how to drive. It just wasn't making any sense to me. So I spent, as I said, all those months preparing the curriculum. In 1965, I introduced, I didn't know of any of this at the time. I did not plan on doing it, but as it turns out, that was the first year that we had the total concept of Safety Town. I did not call it that. I just said we're going to introduce Safety Town. But later on, as I went through the years, heard from other people throughout the country, they said you should make some distinction on that. So in '65 is the year that you'll read, is the total concept of Safety Town, a comprehensive program. Now, in that year, the end of that year, we were fortunate to have some relation, either nephew or niece or someone, attend the program who was related to Tom Fields or Dave Buckles. But anyway, Dave Buckle and Tom Fields came out and gave us television coverage. As a result of that, our superintendent had about 30-some requests from Greater Cleveland. And they said, would you come out and help us set up a Safety Town program? And I said, sure, I'd be delighted to. Now, my husband was vice president of the state JCs. He was president of the local chapter. I was president of JC at in Bedford Heights at the time. And just, as I said, very involved. And we loved people. And we still do. Don't misunderstand me. But it was just fun for us. So we went all over. And all this that I'm saying is we have documented in the office. I didn't want to bring the files. There's no reason to do that. If you want to see them, you're certainly welcome to come to the office. We'd love to have you come to the office to see us. Some of the communities we went into was, I think one of the first ones was Strongsville. Went into Westlake, Strongsville. Westlake took a little while to get to. Parma took a little while to get to. But we made initial steps. And Dr. Brown called prior to '67 and said, we need, you've got a teacher. We don't have a teacher. So I said, one more year. I'll do this only because my husband's on the school board. One more year I'll do this. My teens bought me more nice presents. And they said, after about 3 years, they said, we're not going to buy you any more presents. You're never going to leave. But I had no intentions, as I said, this was something that just kept going. But in the meantime, I'm still finding and doing more research, and I had literally boxes, and we have pictures of this that someday I'll put together in a scrapbook. Literally had boxes in our house, in our bedroom, of a poison box, a matches box, a fire box, and I kept putting these notes, and my husband was going to bed over these boxes, and I said, don't move that box, that's, I know what's in there. So I kept compiling this information over a period of years, and I said, this is ridiculous. It doesn't help anyone for me to know this, and those notes there, and I'm doing it, but I don't have it down on really paper. I was going through what Fred Bowles was doing. I was doing it via the mind. And I said, I've got to start putting this in some form of writing books. But in the meantime, about 1968, I think, was my first out-of-state. As people started moving from Bedford and a few other communities, they would write and say, where could you get working? Who would come and help us set up and this type of thing? So I spent my own money, traveled anywhere to help anybody set up. Said to me, I said, look, we need help. This program is growing and growing and growing. We need help. And someone said, why don't you go to the Cleveland Automobile Club? Their safety programs, maybe they can do something with this. So I went down, and on the day I was there, I'll never forget, it was George Tewksbury's first day with the Automobile Club. And I met with the lady Mildred Now, who was safety director, and I said, please, we need help with the Safety Town program. And now, I'm thinking about the one that, we're working with. So exciting, the people are exciting, it's growing, and she said to me, oh, that's been around for a long time. That's a dead program, nobody's interested in that. And I said, no, it's not. It's really exciting, and I said, I know you know, there are police officers involved with some of the Safety Town programs, and I said, maybe I'm the only one from education, but I would like to be invited to some of the police meetings. Could I be? And they said, we don't have any meetings. I said, but you have to. We always, education people, we always get together and exchange ideas. And they said, no. And I said, well, could we have one? You know, I'll chair it. I'll do any work. Could I do it? And they said, sure, but, you know, we're not going to do anything with Safety Town. And I said, well, could we have it? You know, we don't have a facility. Could we have it here? And this is when it was at the old place, you know. And they said, sure, but, you know, you're going to have to do everything. And so I did. I found out as many Safety Towns as I knew that were in operation in Greater Cleveland. I think we had 10 or 11 at the time, maybe 12. Sent them letters saying we're going to have a Greater Cleveland Safety Town Council, that we called it. And I sent a letter to President John Allerton at the time. I sent this letter to the president, and I had never met him. I just sent him a nice little letter, which I have a copy of, saying this is going to be our first meeting of the Safety Town people, and it would be great if you could attend either at the luncheon for us, or at least be there for part of the meeting to say hello to these people. Coming from the president means a lot more, especially when you're starting a new little chairman, a new little council. And I got a letter back about, no, I'm sorry, I didn't get a letter back. I got a phone call about 2 or 3 days after that from Mrs. Now. And she said to me, don't you ever again send a letter to the president without going through me first. And I just felt hurt. I mean, I said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it, you know, to hurt you. I just felt I should send him a letter as chairman, because that's how when I was president of organizations, I delegated responsibility, and that was the chairman's responsibility. But that was her way of doing it, and I apologized, and I felt badly for her. Then, unfortunately, her chemistry and mine just did not mix. I took a film tour that we had from the Bedford Safety Town, because she would not, you know, she had the image, or not the image, she had heard of Safety Town in the past, and it just didn't go anywhere. It was a dead issue as far as they were concerned, a dead program. And yet they had a blue book on Safety Town. And I said, can I have these books? I'll take them around and pass them out to people. And they said, sure, you can do whatever you want to, but we can't do, you know, we're not interested in doing anything with the program. And so finally we went round and round like this for about 2 years, and in 1970, we just had been growing so much, and we couldn't really discuss everything in an hour-and-a-half luncheon period. I suggested that we have a full-day seminar. I said, with this, if we had this, if I planned this, would you people, you know, be willing to attend? They said, sure. So I worked all of 19, the end of 70, and in 1971 had at the Marriott Inn the first all-day, 8-hour seminar for preschool safety education. Because I had started to travel nationally, we had over 150 people. We had people from Maryland, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., New York, various people. My speaker at that time was Dr. Franklin Herring, who was supervisor of safety for the Rockville Montgomery school system in Rockville, Maryland, and who's tremendously nationally, internationally known in safety education. I had Dr. Don LaFond, who was the curriculum specialist for the Illinois State Department of Education, also in attendance as other things. We had a nice little, again, I picked up the tab on this. We had a nice get-together for all the speakers and so forth beforehand. I've given them the program. I took it to them. I took the film to them. I said, look, our teenagers in Bedford wanted, you know, gave them the film, and Mrs. Now said to me, I'm on the board in Washington, and I will make sure this is not approved. And I said, why are you doing this? And I just could not believe this. So I finally, maybe it was around 71, when I met with Mr. Allerton, I said, I'm just totally confused. I said, I don't know what to do. This program is growing and growing. I cannot afford to do it financially. I cannot afford to do it. We're getting more and more requests. In the Plain Dealer, someone wrote in, and I have a news clipping of this, someone wrote into the Plain Dealer and said, where do we send for Safety Town information? They have Dorothy Schlatt, 34750 Cannon Row. It's a home address. I said, this is an education. It should be part of an educational system. It should be part of an established organization. I shouldn't be operating this out of my home. And again, you know, at that time, Mr. Tewksbury, he had in his office a very nice yearly chart. And he said, see this chart? He said, we don't even think Safety Town is worth putting on this chart. And I said, but people need help. I said, you could make certificates for them. You could do so many things to get publicity for your organization and so forth. They didn't want to have anything to do. So as I said, I went to Mr. Allerton and said, please help me. I don't know. I've been having problems really communicating. And he said to me, and he was very nice, And as I said, now years later, I can understand where they were coming from a little. Not everything. I can forgive a lot of it, but some of it I cannot forgive. But he said, Dorothy, you have to look at the AAA. And me, he said, I'm a president of this AAA. And he said, this is a ship, and I'm a captain of this ship. And he said, what you're talking about, safety, is a very small portion. And preschool safety is a small portion within that small portion. And again, you have to remember, this was the early 70s, folks. And I started with the 68 with them. Preschool safety education wasn't the hottest item on everyone's tongue. So I said to him, I'm having difficulty, communicating with Mildred now. Could you please, is there something that I'm doing? And he said, maybe you should just meet with her personally. I called her and I said, could we have lunch and get, I can explain this or discuss this. And we had lunch, and I said, before we even start to eat, I said, I want to tell you, Mrs. Now, that I feel very badly that whatever I've attempted to do, you seem to feel I'm offending you in some way. And I said, it's simply because I feel this is such an important program and the kids should get something, get this education. Today is Tuesday, and I accept apologies on Tuesday. Okay. That was sort of a hard thing to digest. I can remember police officers, after I would leave some of the meetings, and some of them are retired now, and I don't think they would mind if I gave their names, such as Bob Adair and Frank Beck, and Russ Bierman. Some of these would leave the department, and I'd literally be in tears because I couldn't believe this. And he said, Dorothy, don't let it bother you. Just keep doing your thing. Now, in 1960, let me backtrack here a little bit. When Mrs. Now said to me the program was not successful, and she then added one other thing. Please, she said, not please, prove this program successful. Well, again, that's all I had to hear. I have, ladies and gentlemen, in my office a folder this thick of the numerous times that I went to communities to make presentations, Strongsville, Westlake, you name it. We were there to do it. I submitted this back 2 years later thinking, okay, I'll prove it to them. I took this and laid them on the desk. Again, they said to me, sorry, we can't do anything for you. At that time, I really felt I was, I thought it was me. I kept telling my husband, maybe I'm not preparing the material properly. I'll go home and rewrite it and redo it something. And he said, Dorothy, stop beating your head against a cement block. He said, there's got to be somebody else that can do this for you. So I went to Judge Prytell, August Prytell, who was the president of the Greater Cleveland Safety Council at the time. And Earl Lowe was the executive vice president. And I said, the AAA, I've been trying to get the AAA to observe this program, and they keep telling me they can't do it because they're traffic oriented. And I said, I want to do these other areas, and really what some people have told me is that it's the safety council's area and they don't want to step on toes, and I can understand it. I said, would you be willing to co-sponsor this program for the Greater Cleveland area with the Automobile Club? He was delighted. Said, fantastic. Earl Lowe said, fantastic. Took it back to AAA and said, no, we don't want to work with anyone else. So really our hands were tied. Someone said, contact Congressman Bob Minshall. I did not know this man. I was living in Solon. He was our congressional person. I called him, and I met with him, and I said, could you please, somehow, somewhere in this country, there's got to be someone who can absorb, and what I was looking for is a central place. All I wanted was Safety Town, Post Office Box 1, I don't care whether it was Cleveland, Ohio, Washington, D.C., whatever. I felt it should be in Cleveland because that's where a lot of the pilot project was done, the work was done. It took him, again, this is documented, we have letters, it took him about 2 years to find what agency in Washington we should meet with. I finally, towards the end of, I think it was 72, went into Washington. He said the department we should meet with was the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Okay, now, the education brain still was education. It wasn't working with the political. I didn't know anything about politics, and I didn't know the business thing. But all I know is I had my blinders on for those kids, and my goal was to get a safety town in every town, which is still our goal. So we went into Washington, and I met briefly with Dr. Leroy Brown, who was in charge of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Program Development. And he was very brief and said to write a proposal. So I went back home, wrote a proposal for $25,000, just enough to cover some materials for the books and so forth. I did not hear from him, I wrote to him, did not hear from him. Finally, I drove into Washington, sat outside his office, And I asked the secretary if he's in, and she said yes, but he's not in the office right now, he's in the building. I said, but he will be returning, and she said, yes, his coat's there. And I said, fine, I'll sit here. And I sat and I waited a few hours until he came. And he came in, here was this very big man who played for Michigan State football, and I said, Dr. Leroy Dunn, I'm Dorothy Schlatt. You remember me? Oh, yes, you know. And I said, I sent a proposal to you, and I haven't received anything. And he said, well, brief me a little. I get a lot of proposals. And I said, well, it's for $25,000 for Safe Town, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, first of all, he said, unless it's in six figures, it's not worth our time. And now I can understand it. At that time, I couldn't. But by the time it goes through the various agencies, that's how much time they put into it, okay? Which, at that time, I was furious. Okay, but I don't need any more money. Why do I have to ask? All we need is $25,000 to have someone answer the telephone and send us information. And we talked for a while, and then he said the other thing was that I didn't have a PhD behind my name. Now, as of Sunday, since I have an honorary doctorate degree, I was presented with one, maybe he would listen to me. But unfortunately, he's recently passed away. But anyway, he was very nice and said, you know, we've got to do something with this. And I was fortunate to meet with about 10 other people in that department, Dave Soul and on, Marv Wagner. And they all felt like I did. And they said, really write a proposal. And I said, okay, let's do it extensively. So I was able to contact and through acquaintances met a man by the name of Dr. Edward Coleman, who was Undersecretary, I believe, in Education under Lyndon Johnson. This man was a master at writing proposals. Helped me write a proposal for Safety Town. And my concern was I wanted Safety Towns to go fall under a category which is called 402 funding, which would mean every community, if you in Madison, in Grafton, in Brook Park, wherever, if you wanted a Safety Town, if you raised $500 under 402, the government would match you $500. Very simple. I knew this policy. I knew this was available, and that's what I wanted done. Very simple. And all I kept hearing in Washington is, Dorothy, you're too logical. It's too realistic. It's not going to work. Jackie has heard that numerous times from these people. And I just couldn't understand this. And after we made 2 proposals, they said, well, it's traffic oriented. And I said, I know, but you know, everything relates. Fire relates to traffic. So I had to break down how many hours of Safety Town were directly traffic, how many were indirectly. Well, fire isn't directly traffic, but it is directly traffic when there's a fire ambulance or a fire truck on the street. And I had poisons the same way. Playground safety the same way. When a child is injured at the playground and mom and dad have to leave, you have a potential traffic problem out there. A dangerous one because that parent's not really concentrating on driving. And I had to sit there time after time. I mean, years went around with this. Finally, in 1973, I became a member of the National Women Traffic Safety Leaders. I joined the Highway Safety Federation organization. I was fortunate in that I had a few inside people on the Hill tell me a few things. One was Attorney Richard Peach, who was president of the Citizens for Highway Safety, and Jason Robarts was his honorary chairman while that was in operation. And he said, Dorothy, do me one favor. He, along with other men on the Hill, told me never to say I was a volunteer, because I would not gain the respect of the men on the Hill, that they would think I was a, quote, PTA lady and not do anything, not really listen to me. So I was assigned, and I knew more about designing bridges and environmental control and all sorts of things. And as I said, in 1973, I attended a conference with the Highway Users Federation, and their goal was 3 by 80. And there were 90 men in the room, and myself. And they had 4 or 5 men on the panel, and they were talking about the importance of driver education and driving in general. And then one person in the audience stood up and said, well, I agree with what you said, but I believe that it's that attitude that we have to get instilled in that driver, and it's got to be done at an early age. Now, I'm sitting there, and I went in this room saying, Dorothy, you're not going to say a word. You're going to be quiet. You're going to sit there and observe and listen. And I said, oh, I'm starting to itch. And I thought, no, just hold your hands, be quiet, don't say a word. The next police officer, there was a police officer in the room, stood up and said, I agree with what that gentleman said, but it has to be more than just teaching driving safety. We have to get to these kids about all safety. Well, at that point, you know, I just, here you go, Mr. Chairman, I've got to speak. And I told them what we were doing, and someone said to me, what are you doing to promote this? And I said, I'm trying to get organizations. And I told him briefly I approached the AAA and it was rejected. And also, by the way, after the Cleveland Automobile Club, we went to the National and that was rejected as well there. And I said, I've been trying to deal with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the problems I've encountered there. One man in the room said to me, young lady, you have to learn how to lie. And I said, sir, I don't know what you mean. And he said, when you submit your proposal, he said, do it for traffic. If that's what they want, give them traffic proposal. He said, when you get your money, do whatever you want to. And I said, why? I said, have you not heard this gentleman in the audience say that this is a need? There is a need. We should start teaching early, and it should be all forms of safety. Why do I have to lie about this? And he said, I said, why can't we get 60%? I had this broken down to percentages like you can't believe. I said 60% of this is directly highway safety. So why can't we get 60% of the funds from National Highway Traffic Safety Administration? Why can't we get 20% from HEW? And why can't we get 20% from the Department of Education? It's an education program. This should certainly be together. They said it's not going to work. Well, we discussed this for a little while. We had break time, and I'm not exaggerating. At least 10 or 12 men came, and my back was sore. They patted me on the back and said, you know, what you said had to be said, but I can't say it because I'm on a federal grant or I'm on this type of proposal. But I had everybody's backing. But one man came up to me. It was Fred Vero, Deputy Director, Department of Highway Safety here in Ohio. And he said, oh, I've heard of Safety Town. And he said, I'm not sure, I've heard of you directly, but I've heard of Safety Town in Ohio. And then a gentleman came around the side and he said, oh, do you know our Deputy Director of the Department of Highway Safety, Pete O'Grady? But we went downstairs and talked for a while, and I said, look, I said, somebody's got to sponsor this program. We need a financial backer and a national organization. And he said to me, how would you like a job? And I said, for real money? At which point he almost fell off the chair. This is a politician, who's working for the Department of Highway Safety. And I said, doing what? And he said, I would like you to work 13 counties in northeastern Ohio and help setting up safety consoles and this type of thing. And I said, okay. I said, under one condition. I said that you will let me spend 2 days a week at least traveling the state to set up safety towns. And I said, also, you politicians, my exact words were, you politicians know who has the money. I said that you'll find someone to sponsor this program. And he said, okay, that's a deal. We shook hands. I didn't see him anymore until I went to Columbus. He told me when to come to Columbus, and he told me after that, on the way going home, he said to his deputy director, he said, I hired this lady, and I don't know anything about her other than she's a safety nut, But we did, and I started in September of '73. Working for the Department of Highway Safety, and Pete was just super, and then we traveled, and in fact, he even traveled the state with me. And I must say that several friends, such as Earl Lowe, the Executive Director of the Safety Council, I could not get on programs as Safety Council, as Safety Town. But Earl Lowe was on many programs, so I was allowed to drive with him throughout the state. And Earl Lowe would give up part of his Safety Council time for me to explain Safety Town to people around the state. Now, Pete O'Grady called me in early '74 and said, Dorothy, guess what? We have a national sponsor for Safety Town. I said, fantastic. Okay, it was the Highway Safety Foundation located in Mansfield, Ohio. And they had been working with the State Department a great deal in supplying them pictures of fatalities on the highways and that type of thing. And some films, Signal 30, which I think is the first film that they made. So we went into Mansfield, we met with the executive director, who's John Butler. Dick Wayman was the president, who was partner at Ernst & Winnie at the time, who's now Ernst & Ernst. Or is it the other way around? Ernst & Ernst, now it's Ernst & Winnie, right? And we signed a contract after several meetings that as of July 4th, 1974, the Highway Safety Foundation was going to have Safety Town as part of their organization. I was going to have offices in New York at 1133 Avenue of the Americas. I had been flown to New York to see the offices. They were adjacent to Stanley Fields, who was Sammy Davis's PR man. Sammy Davis was honorary chairman of the Highway Safety Foundation. And it was very exciting. Now, this was about 6 or 7 months before 74 was this July 4th was going to take place. They had a telethon in 1973. The Highway Safety Foundation did. And they wanted another telethon in 1974. I guess their initial request was rejected. They called me and said, Dorothy, you have to go to New York and you have to convince the theater authorities, who is the telethon governing board. Anytime you see a television, a national network, folks, it has gone through extensive screening, believe me. There are organizations that have been waiting in the wings for years to get telethon approval. And I said, okay, what do we have to do? And they said, convince these people that there's a need for a telethon. Now, the Highway Safety Foundation had really 3 programs. They did an awful lot in films. They had the evasive maneuver course, which is excellent, but they were expensive to set up, and the public, it was just not available to most of the public. And the other thing they did was a lot of research. The bridges that you see now being really reconstructed and repaired are really, Will Sachs should get credit for that, because he went into Washington, got those congressmen into a bus and started taking them out to see these bridges back in the 73s. And again, this is documented. I have congressional reports of this. So I went into New York. I met with Beverly Roberts, who was executive director of theater authorities. Now, and there around that table, folks, sat about 20 people. I went in a day earlier to meet with Beverly Roberts, and they told me in advance, now Dorothy, you know, you only have about 10 or 15 minutes with this lady. She's extremely businesslike. She has never been married. Her job is her life and her career and so forth. This lady spent about 6 hours in my hotel room with me. She just thought what I was doing was fantastic, and I read all kinds of nice letters from her. Now, based on when we sat around the board, as they said, I came in a day or 2 earlier, then a day later, 2 of the men, John Butler and Dick Wayman, came in to be questioned by this whole complete board of 20-some people. And they fired questions at all of us. They said, all right, you want a telethon? You're going to get on national airways, and you're going to ask people in local communities to send you money? What are you going to do for those people in the communities? Now, the 3 things that they had, every community could not participate in. Research, people are tired of research. How does that really affect me in my town of Grafton or Milwaukee or whatever? How does it affect me? It doesn't. They couldn't bill these skid evasive maneuver courses cost a tremendous amount of money. They couldn't do that a lot. And the films, you still have to pay for them. So you're not giving back anything to the community. But they could give up my Safety Town guidebooks. I'd written 6 books. And I said, hey, I don't care. Who picks up the tab? You want to put your name on them? That's fine. Whatever you want to do, that's super. Okay, now, that's all right. So community can call, and you want Safety Town guidebooks? We'll send you the 6 of them, courtesy of your donation to the telethon type thing. Great. So the telethon was approved. It was to be held July 4th, 1974. They had to send me in to New York on several occasions prior to that, because I have always been positive-minded about kids and about life in general. When I worked for the State Department, one of the first things I told Peter Grady I wanted done is a coloring book for kids. We had no visual aids for these young kids. I met with film people. I met with car manufacturers saying, please, can you make things for little kids? And they said, what's the resale value? What are you talking about? I said, maybe 500. They said, lady, don't even bother us. You know, we're not going to make money. People are in business to make money. So I said, Pete, please make a coloring book for these kids, at least that we can give to everybody in the state of Ohio, these kids. And the first copy, which is now known as Trooper Tom and something, has been revised, but the first one is Color and Be Safe, and I have an original copy in the office. I have a couple of original copies. And I sat and I had arguments with those people in doing it, because I wanted the whole book to be positive. Okay? And it said, don't forget to put your safety belt. Don't forget to stop and cross the street. And I said, look, we're dealing with kids. Okay, believe me, I'm a nursery school teacher. I know you're setting examples. Let's do the positive. Let's say, do buckle up. Do stop your feet at the curb. Positive. We argued for weeks. You know what we had to settle for? And it's still in the book today. 1 page positive and 1 page negative. It's a do and a don't. Okay? But you have to compromise. Okay? I was willing with the compromise. Okay. Because of this positive attitude, they said, all right, Dorothy, you're going to be involved in a telethon. And folks, I sat and wrote 20 hours of a script for telethon for Safety Town. Who we were going to have come in at what time. You're not going to have Safety Town at 2 o'clock in the morning for the kids. That's when we were going to have something else come in. I was flown in to do muscular dystrophy with Jerry Lewis, and I was flown in later to do cerebral palsy with Paul Anka and Dennis James. I got to meet Carol Channing and the tall basketball player and Howard Cosell and all those people. Very nice people, super people. I worked behind the stage. I worked in the audience. I worked at some of the locations to see how fast, when somebody calls in cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy, once you call in and they write down, that thing is in the mailbox in a matter of about 15 minutes. That's how accurate they were. They were just super, proficient. We had learned this. This was new to me. I didn't know anything about this. And there isn't a great need, unfortunately, for consultants on telethons in local communities. But, so we were excited about this. Sammy Davis's PR company sent out an invitation to top people in New York. On April 2nd, 1974, at the Waldorf Astoria, an elaborate wine and cheese affair was going to be held. Mrs. Sammy Davis Jr. was going to present Sammy's side, because Sammy's accident with his eye, and that's how he got involved with traffic safety, and was going to present safety information on his behalf, and I was going to explain Safety Town to these executives and corporate people. On April 1st, I was called in by John Butler and said, Dorothy, you're not going to New York. The telethon is off. And John Butler was known as a big jokester, and I said, oh, April Fool, John. Hi, yeah, sure. Okay, John, see you later. He said, Dorothy, this is serious. You can't fly in New York. We're going to cancel your flight. And he said, it's off. And I said, what do you mean it's off? And he said, there's no telethon. And I said, why? And he said, well, it wasn't approved by the board of directors of the Highway Safety Foundation. I said, you mean to tell me these people went all the way to New York, you've been doing all this in New York and getting it approved, and it's not been approved by the local board? None of this made sense to me, okay? Now, let me backtrack here a minute. While I was working with the Department of Highway Safety meeting people, I had a phone call one time at home. This really had nothing to do, I don't think, in relationship with the Highway Safety Department. I had a phone call from Frank Beck, who started the Safety Town in Cleveland Heights. And he said, Dorothy, I talked to a man who came in and he's with an ad agency, his name is George Brown, and he's with Penn Haymaker Ad Agency, and they want to do something for Safety Town. And I said, oh, great. And he said, I gave him your phone number, talk to him. So the man came over to our house. We talked, and he said, the Wayne Corporation is one of my clients, and he said they would like to do something for Safety Town. Now, I was not that knowledgeable about Wayne Corporation. I didn't even know who Indian Head was as far as corporations. But the Wayne Corporation was, and I think still is, the largest bus manufacturer in the United States and Canada. And I said, how fantastic, this is great. And he said, what can we do for you? I said, please get us publicity. I want this, a Safety Town in every town, a Safety Town in every town in this country. And he said, fine. So I worked months with him, and I wish I would have brought a copy of the ad, and I apologize for that, but we have it in a slide presentation and we have it in the office. Those nice people, and I think the final tab was somewhere between $60,000 to $80,000 that they paid for a 4-page colored ad that I worked with them on in detail. That ad was placed in the American School Board Journal, Nation Schools, and the Future magazine. Now, the Future magazine was a USJC publication. From that ad, and this appeared in early '74, January and February issue, I believe it was. From that ad, we received over 3,000 requests in the Highway Safety Foundation. That's the address we used. Now, keep in mind that we had already been approved for that telethon, and we were going to give out free books. So in that ad, it said they were going to get a free set of guidebooks. This is early '74, January, February. Then we find out in April, I keep calling our printer in Mansfield to get some information. I said, what do these books do? We sent a letter out to everyone who sent in saying, sorry, the printer is late, your books are delayed, we'll send them to you immediately. When they called us on April 1st and told us, and I realized then that the Highway Safety Foundation was not only not going to have a telethon, but they were going to fold because of financial problems. I am sitting on, folks, over 3,000 requests, okay? These people are waiting for free books. We've already sent up one letter saying, we're sorry for the delay. My husband and I sat up probably 2 nights, at least maybe 3 nights, saying, what are we going to do? This is what we've been waiting for. Pete O'Grady called me and he said, Dorothy, the Highway Safety Foundation is folding. We won't forget about, the contract. We'll write a new contract. We'd like you to stay on the State Department. I said, Pete, I can't do it. I said, this is what we've been waiting for, the national publicity. This is fantastic. We'll never do this again. I said, we either have to make a break and go full steam ahead with this or just forget about the whole Safety Time program. And my husband and I sat down, as I said, for at least 2 or 3 nights and said, what do we do? What are all, what are our alternatives? Okay, we had 3 alternatives as we saw. Number 1, we could send these people a nice little letter saying, we are sorry, the Highway Safety Foundation is folded, you can't get any more information, and so forth. One option. And I want you to think, if you were one of these people, how you would have felt. I'll tell you how I would have felt. The next option would be to send these people letters saying, okay, we advertised it as free information, but now you have to pay, folks. It's going to cost you 15 or 20 bucks to get this information. You know what I would have said? You take that program and stuff it, lady, or whoever. If you're going to advertise it free, that's false advertising. You don't do that. The other thing we do is just absorb the print cost and send the books out as if nothing happened to the organization, and just continue the organization, not under Highway Safety Foundation, but we'll do the organization. And my husband, I said, honey, we put so much into this, that's the only alternative, and he agreed. Unfortunately, we were not wealthy people. We had to take a loan. He was not accustomed to writing $8,000 checks out. We sent those to all those people. Now, something else that we had not figured on is that when you publicize things, what you do is you get requests, and people want information, they want speakers, they want all these things. And we did not really have that. By the way, everyone in Greater Cleveland at that time that was part of the Safety Town Council, received, I gave them a free set of books, of course, even though they were in an ongoing situation. I just felt at a meeting one time we gave them a free set of books. Now, I discovered when I kept calling the printer in Mansfield, he said that they had some financial problems and that's why they didn't give them the books at the Highway Safety Foundation. Then we went into, the books had been copyrighted, or on the back of the books were going to be the copyright under Highway Safety Foundation. Now, someone, as I was leaving, the executive director, John Butler, and a few other people called me and said, Dorothy, you better, if you're going to continue with this program, and I told them I definitely had all intentions of doing it, they said, you better do something, because they had talked to a lot of people. Just to give you an example, on the telethon, we were going to work with a company that was going to make a baby food company. I can't remember if it was Heinz or Gerber's or who, and we were going to do a promotion called a 6-pack for safety with baby food jars and little baby food, little safety messages. On the actual stage of the telethon, we were going to have a safety town whereby Ronald McDonald, McDonald's was going to be involved, and Ronald McDonald's, R. Clancy, which we met in '73 because he was a police officer in Mansfield, was going to show Ronald McDonald safety rules. He had arranged with some schools in the New York area to work with retarded children and show them how to go through the whole program and so forth. Now, shortly after my husband and I are confronted with this, what do we do with these 3,000 things, I get a phone call from Mrs. Sammy Davis, Jr., who I had met a few years earlier when they opened up a driving school in New York. Sammy was not able to attend, and she attended on his behalf, and I was driven in the limousine to her apartment and picked her up and really sat in the back seat with her and gave her information on how to carry on for Sammy. And she was just a delightful lady. So she called me and she said, honey, she said, what is happening at the Highway Safety Foundation? She said, the news media people are calling me and asking me, are we getting paid for this? And she said, I don't understand. No one called this poor lady. Very, very unfortunate situation. I later got a call from Walter Mason, who was Sammy Davis's PR man, and he was in Illinois at the time. Sammy was playing at Mill Run Theater, and he said, Dorothy, can you come up here? He says, we've got to find out what's happened. So I went up and talked to him, and he said, you know, this has left a bad taste in Sammy's mouth. And for those of you who are not familiar, we have copies. It's made the front page of the Plain Dealer with Mayor Ralph Perk, with Governor Gilligan. It made the Washington Post. It made various national newspapers unfolding of this organization. And I sat and talked to Walter, and I said, you know, I'd like to continue this, you know, does Sammy still want to be part of this? And he said, Sammy right now would prefer not to have anything to do with any organization because of this bad taste. And I can certainly understand. Here's this man who gives his name and all of a sudden it doesn't know what's happening. So we came back, as I said, with all these problems, and someone said, Dorothy, you know, those books that you had printed have the copyright to Highway Safety Foundation, and they're not valid because there's no longer an organization, Highway Safety Foundation. You better get the copyrights of those, or somebody, you know, the world isn't nice out there, somebody's going to pick this up. So I came back. Fortunately, I had known some attorneys through a lifetime, and we got the program copyrighted strictly as a protection. You don't spend that many years in writing materials and not get it copyrighted. Okay. Now, the registration of the Safe to Town program, and again, you have to please forgive me because there's so many things that happened, occurred in 1968. I spoke to the Solon Chamber of Commerce, the Solon JCs, and at that meeting was a Mr. Donald White. Again, these letters are in the file. He was from North Canton. And after the meeting, he came up to me with another man, and he said, is this program registered? And I said, I'm not sure. This was 1968. I said, I know the AAA has a blue book on it, and I said, I don't know if they have it registered or not, but I'll check with them. So I went back, as I said to Mrs. Now, and I said, is this program registered? And she said she didn't know if it was, and I said, well, if it's not, I said, I don't have the money to register it, but it better be registered because someone's going to pick it up. I said, I don't have this kind of money to do this. I didn't know anything about registration copyright. And she said, well, she knew of an organization that would do it for me and do it for us. And I said, fine. Okay, I didn't hear any more about that because that was not my concern. But it surfaced again in 1974. As I said, we were, the organization was then my husband and myself. And we had the attorneys do the proper the work and get the organization as a nonprofit status and so forth, which we are under 501c3. And I went into Wayne, New Jersey to make a Safe Town presentation. Again, there's newspaper clippings on this. And there were about maybe 50 to 60 people, 70 people in the audience. And in the back of the room sat two men that were like this. Okay, just did not glare. And I was giving them little funny things about what kids do and making it funny. And these men did not budge. In fact, at the point I didn't even look at them because they were starting to make me a little nervous. So at the end of the presentation, I said, okay, you know, I'd like to open this up to questions. And the man raised his hand and he said, when are you going to take your display down from the shopping mall? Now that man happened to be the superintendent of Wayne, New Jersey, and I didn't know that. And I said, we don't have a display up at the shopping mall. And he said, it's up there. I said, no. I said, we don't have it. And I'm embarrassing this poor man. He didn't say anything up there in front of all the PTA and all those people there. It turned out that there were three men, and he showed me the letter, and I have a copy in our office, that were selling Safe to Town for $12,000. He showed me this letter, okay? And he was interested because he thought the program was worthwhile. He did not respond immediately to this letter, at which point these men sent him another letter saying that if he was interested in the Safe Town, houses, that they would sell it to him for $3,000. Now, can you imagine that man sitting there listening to me that whole presentation saying, hey, those people are making $9,000 on that thing? I didn't know what this man was talking about. And he said, is this program registered? And I said, phew, that's been years ago, but I think we registered somewhere along the way. So I had to go back and check on that. Now, when we're still looking for an organization sponsor, okay? I went into, my husband at that point went from Case Western Reserve to Akron. When Case Western Reserve merged, he had an opportunity to go to Akron U in chemistry, and had been there a few years. And I had met, fortunately, William R. Miller, who was safety director of Goodyear at the time at one of the conferences I traveled. And I called him and I said, Bill, I said, this seems like a natural, you know, for the tire companies. I call them the tire companies. I found out later it's the rubber companies because they make more than tires. At that time I said the tire companies. And I said, could you arrange a meeting with me, for me? And I said, I'd love to have you go with me, to the CEOs, whoever. But I said, you know, we've got to get this off the ground. So he arranged a meeting for me to meet with Mr. Davies, who was assistant to the president of Goodyear. Now, when he confirmed that meeting, I said, do you have any objection if I have Paul Livack? Paul Livack was the executive director at Akron Chamber of Commerce. I said, and who was really behind this program as well, and I had started programs in Fair Lawn and other communities in Akron. And I said, do you have any objection? And Bill said, no, be delighted to. Now, I'm thinking, I'm starting to learn business. I thought, if this man, Mr. Davies, assistant to the president, and sees on one side I have in-house support with their safety director, and sees on the other hand that I have outside support with the Chamber of Commerce director, then certainly he's going to be on my, rather than me walking in cold as a lady saying, hey, I have this nice program, you know, would you help me? So I took in a few of these books. I took in my 6 guidebooks, and I took about half of these 3,000 requests that I have. And the only way that I've ever operated, the only way I know how to operate is to be honest. So I said, Mr. Davies, we need help. I said, we have an exciting program for kids, and we were going to be sponsored by the Highway Safety Foundation. This man is a businessman. He's read the Washington Post. He's read the Wall Street Journal and so forth. I said, the organization, Highway Safety Foundation, is no longer in operation. It folded, but we're getting requests. Here's some of the requests. We need some help. And I opened the book and I said, you know, I don't care if you put a picture, the picture of the CEO with a message to kids. I don't care if you make a chart. I said, I don't even care if you put the blimp on the back. Whatever you want to put on this, you're going to pay for it. You know, we need somebody to absorb the cost of these books. But anyway, he said to me, we have 19,000 people working here in Akron. And he said, we like to do programs here for people in Akron. And went on for that. And when he finished, I commended him. I said, Mr. Davies, I think that's wonderful that you're concerned about your employees. But I said, you wouldn't have 19,000 people working here if only Akron people bought your product. You are a worldwide company. I said, wouldn't it be great? Again, I opened the book. Wouldn't it be great if the CEO's picture said, we're concerned about kids all over the world? Wouldn't this be fantastic? He then went on to tell me that they donated $500,000 to build a children's hospital in Akron. And he said, and he was very proud, and he said, we're going to give them another $100,000 if they complete on time. Okay? Which time I commended him, and I said, Mr. Davies, I just wondered, wouldn't it be possible maybe to give them $450,000 and maybe put $50,000 in a prevention program so some of those kids might never have to get to the hospital? At which point he put together and said he had to go to another meeting, and that was the last I saw of that. Okay? Now, I could go on and tell you stories of that with corporations and so forth. But anyway, I then went to an organization called the Veterans of Safety. Again, in talking back and looking back in the research, they said they would involve somehow with the Mansfield program. So I said, all right, Veterans of Safety. So I arranged to go into Chicago and speak before that group. And I said, and again, you had to be in safety for 15 years, and a lot of these people were elderly in age, retired, some of them were retired, and there must have been 25 or so in the room. And I said, folks, I have a problem. The Safety Town program is growing in leaps and bounds. We're getting, from those 3 magazines, we were picked up by United Press International, Associated Press, Women's Day. We were in the insurance. I was flown, went into Chicago to meet with the insurance group. They put 2 pages in their insurance group, and we just had tremendous coverage with this program. And I said to these people, I know that somewhere along the way you were interested or involved with Safety Town somewhere, and I said, we would like you to consider sponsoring this. You're, Veterans of Safety organization, to consider sponsoring this program on a national basis. And I had the shock of my life when one person in the audience, a lady, stood up and said, who are you to come here and tell us that you're behind the Safety Town program? Our reports from Cleveland show us that Mildred Now has been promoting the Safety Town program in Cleveland. And I stood and I said, wait a minute, things went through my mind, and for the first time in my life, as my mother said, the dear Lord will do things for you when you don't know what to do. And I said, you can do one of 2 things, Dorothy. You can get out of this room and just leave, or you can stand up for what you've done. And I said, wait a minute, that's not true. And what I had done, preparing all these proposals, now whether it was intentional or not, I think I'm being very nice here. Gut feelings telling me I'm being very nice. Whether this was intentional or not, but my name was taken off of much of this, and evidently her name and AAA name was put on this. Now, they had me there for at least, well, I can tell you, we started about, I think, 9 o'clock, and it went to 12:30. At which point, for 3.5 hours, these people were shooting holes in me, literally shooting holes in me. At which point, a young man, a young man, he had to probably be in his mid-40s or so, stood up. I had never seen this man before. He happened to be from Cleveland. And he said, I can't believe that we're doing this to this young lady. She's come up here voluntarily, wants to do something with the program, and we're shooting holes in her. So because he was from Cleveland, and he lives in Cleveland now, his name is Fred Pappenfuss, they assigned a committee. They had him head the committee for 1 year, from 74 until next year at 75. I had to prove to him that every place that I had been to, that I really went to. So, yeah, I had to get copies of letters from people in Strongsville, at which point he went back. Fred Pappenfuss went back in 75. They said they didn't want me to come back in 75. He took the 6 guidebooks because they were considering doing a Safety Town guidebook, which they had done a preliminary version, and they were going to go. And I guess Fred opened his suitcase from what he tells me, and is, I'd be happy to have a meeting with. These people have given so much of their time and money that I hate to have them for anything unless it's really crucial. But he said he opened the guidebooks and said, look, this is all done. Why are we competing? Why are we doing this type of thing? I should backtrack here and say after that, when that 12:30 session was over, Mr. Frederick Deeg, D-E-E-G, who was the president of that group, took me to his room with his wife, and he just could not believe what this group was doing, or this whole thing. And I had lunch, I was his luncheon guest with his wife in his hotel room, and just very nice. So there were nice people within the organization. But he had to prove that, yes, I was the one that did the work, and I couldn't understand why I had to prove it, why somebody else didn't have to go back and do the work. Why do I have? I know I've got this documentation. But we did it for him anyway, in 75. And as I said, in 74, we started the nonprofit organization. And fortunately, the people that were in Safety Town, I was able to keep up meetings with them, and we said, okay, what is it do you need? How can we best help you? They needed visual aids. That was the biggest thing. And that's why the first thing we came out with were the Clancy posters, okay? Excuse me. The teachers and police officers said at that time, after that, gee, that's great, but we need something to do with rainy weather type. What do we do, okay? We made the Clancy puzzles. And again, I called puzzle companies, and they wouldn't talk to me for the small amount I wanted. If they were interested, we had to get quantities, and I didn't have the money. They wanted the money. I didn't have that kind of money to pay for these things. So I went to a printer, Dick Evans in Sullivan, and I said, Dick, we need some puzzles. I don't have the money. He was a friend of mine. This man carried our account for about $8,000 for a couple of years for us. Now, when they came off the presses, because his presses could not take the real thick paper, it wasn't thick enough. It was just the puzzle piece, and I said, they're going to fall apart. So, okay, we buy additional thickness of the same thing, and my mother, bless her, who was 81 in April, it took her years, but she glued puzzles, the outside of them, to put these so the kids would have to work within those things. We then went, I can't recall the next thing that came. I think the coloring book, the Safety Town coloring book was one, and I went to Westville Companies, and they printed them for us, and we gave them around free. And I used to drive to police departments and city halls and distribute these to them. This was fun for us to do, except I couldn't go around the country and keep doing this. But the more we grew nationally, the more difficult things became because you're running into different ordinances. What we were teaching in this community as far as bus ordinances did not apply to another community and that type of thing. Anyway, 1974, I should say the early 75, I guess it was, end of 74, early 75, Will Sachs, the man who I mentioned before, said to me, he felt bad, everybody felt badly about really us getting caught in the middle of the shuffle. And he said, Dorothy, why don't you go to Prudential Insurance? He said they were one of our supporters. He gave me a man's name by the name of Cole A. Lewis, who was Director of Public Affairs, of Community Affairs. And I called Mr. Lewis, and I went in, and I talked with him first for the first time. He said he would arrange a meeting with some of the other people in the Prudential. I went back another time, and I took a homemade flip chart of Safety Town, its definition, that type of thing. And again, I'm with about 20 vice presidents. There was a vice president of Helen Knowlton, George Blazer, and all kinds of people around this table. And I said, at the end of my presentation, I said, gentlemen, I said, I wish that I would have had the money to hire a professional fundraiser or PR person to explain this to you. But I said, I don't have the money, and I said, this is the best I can do. And some words to that effect. And at which point, I can't recall who it was in the room that said, young lady, if you would have done that, if you would have sent in a slick Madison Avenue type person, we would have said, thank you, but we're not interested. But because we see how dedicated you are and how interested in that you really need help with those that flip chart, that we will get behind you and support you. Okay, now this took again several meetings going into Newark, New Jersey, where they're located. The end result is that Prudential has been my godfather. They have been with us every year and continue to support us. The first thing they did is I took a Safety Town game, which was on a cardboard in black letters and all kinds of, colored crayon type things, and their art department put it together as you see it now. It cost them, they made, Jackie, what was the first amount? 5,000 or 5,000 for us, the first printing. The end result was we had a meeting, and they said, Dorothy, what are you selling the games for? And I said, $5. And they said, do you know it cost us $7.80 to manufacture this game? And they said, because they're Prudential, that people will tack on, and printers will tack on added money. They said, it would be better for us to give you a grant and for you to have that done locally. We said, sure. Now, I had no idea what we were getting into, okay? We had to get the top of the board, just a sheet on the board, printed in one place. We had to take that sheet and send that to another place to get the board done. We had to get the cards individually, and we sat and put them together. We had to get the little cards somewhere else. We had to get the boxes at someplace else. At first we came out with a spinner with the metal spinner, and the spinner where we ordered from was making the same spinner evidently from Mattel and other companies. There was a lawsuit for almost 2 years because the child was pinched, and there was a lawsuit, so no spinners could be made. Now our spinners are plastic. But I would have much preferred to pay Prudential $7.80 for the games than take a $2 loss on it. But that's what they did first with the game. They made a little brochure for us for the few materials that we had. In 1976, I had 21 coordinators around the country at that time, and I, again, should go back and explain that as I traveled around the country, I would make deals with people. One man, for example, who was the first one that I can think of, was Mike Lynch, who lived in South Euclid, Ohio, when we had a Safety Town in South Euclid. And he moved to Monroeville, Pennsylvania, and he called and he said, Dorothy, nobody here knows about a Safety Town, would you help us set up? And I said, sure, but I said, before that, what I used to do is go to the chief of police, and many of them I was thrown out of office. Lady, we've got enough to do, don't come and bother me with this type of thing. I was thrown out of the superintendent's office. Lady, we've got enough trouble with union negotiation and teacher labor problems, don't give me any more problems. You're going to open up a whole big bag of worms. If you say preschool safety, parents are going to want preschool band and preschool gymnastics. Hey, lady, go out that door. Leave me alone. Don't come here with any more problems. I really should say at this point that I cannot take, and I should not take, the credit for getting Safety Town started. That really, and he would be here tonight if he was not ill with a sinus infection, is my husband. Because when he was state vice president of the JCs in Greater Cleveland, for the state, but mainly in the Greater Cleveland area, he had to, as state vice president, visit the local chapter. And they would give him time, and I would go on and be sort of the last 15, 20-minute thing, and we would do Safety Town. And then he would talk on behalf of what the benefits were to the school board and from the educational standpoint, and they would listen to him. Number one, he was a man. I don't know if that's number one, that's one of the issues. Another issue was that he was on the school board, and they respected him. And he was at the college level, and again, that was much more respected than the preschool nursery school situation. So he really deserves the credit for getting this in the educational vein. Now, I have to say that, well, let me backtrack again here. When we were going to have the telethon in 1974, we had gone to National Safety Council in Chicago and asked them to be part of us, part of the telethon. At which point Paul Hill and Gene Miller and some of the people said, oh, we don't have anything to do with Safe Town. And I said, oh, am I going to have to go through this again? So the vote was no. They weren't going to do anything with that, with the telethon with us. When the Safety Foundation folded, I went back to Mr. Vincent Toffany, who was president. He and I were very nice, very good friends. He personally would have loved to have undertaken the program. He loved it. In fact, I was there and we had almost signed our papers for my working under their roof and their absorbing the Safety Town program when they were faced with having to lay off 40-some people, and they said, Dorothy, we cannot justify putting on a new program when we're laying off 44, and there was a lawsuit by some of the people that were laid off because they went to lunch and came back with pink slips. You talk about being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Can you believe one person could be in so many places at the wrong time? We went back in '74 and said, please do something with this. And they didn't want, as I said, to do anything. Although we kept communications, I would meet with them periodically, telling them what to do. It took me, in 1968, when I went to National Safety Congress for the first time, and I said, fantastic, maybe there'll be something on safety education. There wasn't. It was driver ed information. And again, the driver ed teachers were saying in these sessions time after time, and we still hear this, we've got to get to those young kids to teach the attitude. And I kept saying, but here's a program. Somebody please pick this up and do something with this. So we had the support. Now, 1968, I met with this committee of the school and college section. I said, please put Safety Town on the national program for next year. And they said, oh, no, nobody will come. Everybody has this bad taste. I said, what do you mean everybody? Not that many. There weren't that many safety towns around. In 1964, there were only about 10 safety towns. What do you mean everybody has this bad taste? Well, it was a few people that in crucial spots that knew about it. It took me, folks, 68 and 69 to write and encourage these people to have Safety Town on the program in 1970. And even though I strongly was against this, do you know what they listed in the program, and I have a copy of the program, a second look at Safety Town. And I said, why? And they said, if we don't put that, nobody's going to come. And I said, nobody. The first thing I could think of was, what was the first look at Safety Town? I said, you're talking about something 30 years ago. You know, let's forget this and let's start off fresh. But that's what it was, a second look at Safety Town. Now, as I said, I'm sorry for backtracking here, but I have to do this because this is important. This is 1970, I spoke there. There were 150 educators. It was the first year that the old Knickerbocker Hotel was changed to the Playboy Towers. And if you don't think I had a hard time when I got this invitation to speak, to take to my superintendent in Bedford and say, I've been invited to speak at the Playboy Towers. Yeah, you get that passed, your school board approval. But we did. We got that passed. And as I said, there were 150 educators in the room. There were 3 of us on the panel speaking on Safety Town. The first gentleman was with a program called Safetyville in Flint, Michigan. And people asked me about that with Safety Town. They said, you know, Centerville, wanted the Safetyville in Centerville. I said, hey, that's no problem with me. I don't care. As long as you have the program with the kids, it didn't bother me. Safety Town, we have Tot Town, Tiny Town. It didn't bother me. Legally, I understood it bothered. My attorneys were having really some fits about that, but that wasn't my concern. But anyway, this gentleman stood up and he talked about the program that they were doing in Flint, Michigan, which is no longer in operation, by the way. And when he mentioned in his presentation that in their class, and these were not questions from the floor, he was just voluntarily giving information about his program. He said that their classes contain children from the ages of 4 to 11-year-olds in the same class. And you heard a groan in that room like, oh, okay? This man was not an educator. He was not a police officer. He was with the insurance company that sponsored Safetyville. The first question asked of this man, they asked questions after each speaker. The first question asked of this man by Ken Light, the National Safety Council, was, when in the hell are you going to stop jamming Safety Town down our throat? Now, folks, I'm the next speaker. It's my first big national national convention to speak at. My knees were rattling. I said, I can't talk. I didn't know whether to faint and tell them I couldn't talk. Whatever. Again, as I said, the dear Lord has blessed me on many occasions. I didn't have to hear the man introduce me, the chairman. I just remember he said, Dorothy, it's yours. And maybe I was sitting there for 5 minutes or whatever, but I got up to the podium and I said, all right, just do it like nothing. So I made my presentation as if I was the first speaker. I showed my homemade 16 millimeter that my teens did for me in Bedford. They stood on ladders and on top of the buildings and shot all kinds of things, which we still have. But anyway, when he opened it up for questions, I mean, you could have seen this go right through the audience. And it was Dr. Alice Holden, who was curriculum director of the state of Maryland, stood up and she said, young lady, what you have is an educational program. And she said, I highly recommend the very first thing you do is change the name of your program. And I said, I can't do that. I said, I didn't think of this program. I said, this was done by Fred Bowles, and what I've done is brought it up to today's standards. And then I really started thinking, and I said, wait a minute. I said, let's stop and think about this a minute. They said, well, it wasn't taught properly. Policemen didn't know about education of kids. And I said, wait a minute, that was 1937, and you're talking 1970. I said, how can you take the research that we have now and apply it and say that these people should have applied it back then? It wasn't available. Where did we have, even in 1970, even today, folks, name me a college or university in this country that offers preschool safe education training. We're working with Central Missouri State, Michigan State, and other colleges, Wisconsin. Many of them use our curriculum guide to train teachers, but there is no information. I said, why are you shooting holes at these men? Sure, maybe they weren't teaching properly, but they were doing what was best, what they thought was best, okay? I saw things throughout the years that it just hurt me right in Greater Cleveland. There are several safety towns in Greater Cleveland that I would really shut down if I had the power to do it, because they're not teaching properly and effectively. I don't like to go into a safety town and see kids standing in a corner and being punished because they can't make their turn signals. I don't like to get phone calls from parents saying that their kids came home from safety town and were punished because they couldn't color within the lines. And people call us. We're the parent organization. We're the National Safety Town Center. This is what we're there for, to help. We've got to, so maybe we are the as I've been called, the Joan of Arc and the Ralph Nader of safety for kids. Somebody had to speak up for these kids. I mean, just to say you have a safety town program and you put them behind chairs and you color with them for 20 hours and you play games, that's not safety, folks. And I have always defended, and I will always defend, the police officers who did it from day one, Fred Bowles and Ralph Casper, Frank Beck, all those people who did it from day one until the past few years. Folks, there are now classes available, not in preschool safety education, but safety education in general, on child development. We had a seminar May 12th, and most of the comments were nice. We had some comments, and we know exactly who they were from, who said it was a waste of their time to come and listen to a child psychologist talk on child development. I had that. A waste of time. That's sad. Then if you have that attitude, folks, I'll be the first one to tell you get your rear end out of that program. You shouldn't be working with those kids. I'll defend you prior to that, but information is available, and if you don't understand that child development, is the title of my book that I've been working on for about 10 years, is called Child Development as Relates to Safety Capabilities. We have to know about their intermuscular development of their neck, why they can't turn, their eye problems, their intermuscular, all these things. This is what's been written in the curriculum guide. This is why we do things step by step. You don't put the traffic light on and the railroad crossing light and all this at one time. We did the seminar in Illinois, and the teacher came up to me, or the director came up to me and said, our teacher couldn't come, but here's her program. You know what she has on the second day? Introduce strangers. I mean, those kids aren't even familiar with their teacher and they're teens. They're just going to introduce a new element. You can't do this with these kids. Okay? Anyway, as I said, that was back in the 70s in my debut with the national conference. Fortunately, during that conference, I had an opportunity to hear Dr. Paul Blasdale, a fantastic speaker, a dynamic man. What can I tell you? Probably the last of the pounding the hand on the table and that type of thing. And he said a couple things in his presentation that I just thought was exciting to me, and I told him about it afterwards. He said, it was almost like he knew I was in the audience and he was talking directly to me. He said, don't wait 20 years for research to tell you what you already know. And I met him afterwards, and he spoke, in fact, before I did. And I met him afterwards, but I was so excited and didn't see, you know, I was just relating to this thing. But I remember that a great deal because I heard that so much in Washington. They said, Dorothy, we're not going to do a thing in Washington for you until you can show us bottom line statistics. As a result of 20 hours, is this going to reduce the traffic accident pattern? And I said, you guys, I don't believe you. I don't believe, in fact, I told Dr. Leroy Dunn, and there are other people in the room, I said, you might have your PhD in highway traffic, but you don't know one damn thing about kids and child development. Because I said, that's not the purpose of the program. Take it out of the statistic area. This is an education program. And I started comparing it to math, English, and every other subject. I said, as a nursery school teacher, I taught my kids numerals, then addition, subtraction, in sequential order. We have to do the same thing with safety education. I don't expect these kids to have 20 hours and go out and handle the street situation. That's been proven. They can't handle traffic patterns until 9 to 11 years of age. So why are we teaching safety to 4 and 5-year-old kids? To handle the things that they can handle right now. I don't want kids crossing the street by themselves, especially not with the traffic light. Much too difficult. Intersections, even mid-block crossings. Cars are bigger and so forth. But kids are doing it. Riding bicycles, they're doing it. When I went into the Bicycle Federation in New York for bicycle information, I told them I was preparing these guides. This was, again, in probably late 72, 73, somewhere. Preparing these guides, and I want to put bicycle information. And I said, what do you have on bicycle information that I could put in this program for preschool children? And Mr. Clifford Morris, I believe his name, Clifford Morris was director, and he said, executive director, and he said, oh, you're not telling children to ride bicycles at 4 and 5 years of age. And I said, no, I'm not telling them to ride them. They are riding them. I'd like to tell them the safe way to ride them. And he said, oh, no, just in your community. Your community's an exception. No, they're not riding around the country. Again, folks, I spend a couple $1,000s, and I send 2,000 questionnaires to 50 safety towns around the country. We send 40, because 40 kids in a class. We said, select one session, give them to the parents, give us feedback. We have this document in the office, again, 4 pages. How old was the child when we received the first bicycle? What kind of brake, hand or foot brake? What kind of training did he have? What made you feel your child was ready for a two-wheel bicycle? Just a few of the answers on what made you feel your child was ready for a two-wheel bicycle. Because Grandma and Grandpa said he was. Because everybody on the block had one. The neighbors would think my child was retarded if he didn't have a bicycle. I couldn't believe this. I could not believe the responses on some of these things, okay? So we were constantly faced with that, the bottom line thing. And I finally said, look, I will listen to the bottom line. And we have research. There's research done by Dr. Nick Odessa, which we have by Urbana-Champaign University. Recently, we had Dr. Who's the man at Cleveland State that did the research for us? Ken Fiore and his committee did a research. And yes, there has been a traffic reduction in accidents, but that to me is ridiculous. I don't want to even release that to compare it because I don't want to get Safety Town in that category. It's got to be an educational program and looked at as a prevention program and not bottom line statistics. First of all, and as I said, if anyone ever asks you this question, because they will, especially in communities where you're either organizing or reorganizing, bottom line statistics mean absolutely nothing to me, folks, unless you show me how those accidents occur. And I've given this example numerous times in Washington and around the country. All right, let's say, for instance, in Cleveland, Ohio in 1980, 4 children were killed crossing the street, just in Cleveland. In 1981, we had a safety town in 1981. Let's pretend we had a safety town in 1981. And we had in there 6 children were killed. Oh, look, they have a safety town, you have 2 more kids killed in accidents. Does that say in there that maybe, as it did, 3 kids were walking to school and were hit by a drunk that jumped the sidewalk with his car, lost control? Does that tell me in that? That doesn't tell me anything in there. So I said, don't give me your bottom line statistics, folks. That doesn't tell me a thing with this. So these are the things we went round and round with. Now, I finally got to, in I don't know when it was, 75 or so, when Joan Claybrook was in office, she called and asked if I would speak in Brooklyn, Ohio. They were having a town meeting on Safety Town, which I did briefly. I kept after Washington because I felt that's really where it should go. They said, Dorothy, funds are not available. You can't qualify. So I went to HEW. This had to be about maybe 76 or 77. Went to HEW, and I took it to a gentleman who was fairly up the ladder in the division, in the department. And I said, I'm Dorothy Schley. He said, I know who you are. I've heard about you. And he said, I think you've got a great program. And I said, all right. I said, I've gone through a lot of red tape in the years. I want you to be up front with me. I said, I'll prepare a proposal if you feel that your agency is seriously interested and if there's any chance of doing anything. And he said, Dorothy, do me a favor. He said, don't give me your books and don't send us your books. And I said, why? I said, somebody's got to absorb this. Somebody's got to undertake this over. He said, let me tell you how government works. He said, first of all, now I'm not saying this is in all agencies, okay, but this is what this man told me. He said, we have to justify our positions here. He said, if you send me the information, and he said, I'll be part of this group because I want to make sure I have a job. He said, I'm going to take your information and submit a proposal to upstairs saying that we should have a committee for 3 to 4 years to study, big word folks, the need for preschool safety education. He said, you and I know, sure it's going to come out positive. Yes, there's a need for it. After that, he said, then we're going to have to take maybe about 3 or 4 years and do some research and write a curriculum. And he said, well, we've got your stuff, we'll change some of that. But he said, we'll drag it out for about 3 or 4 years. He said, then we'll pick out 4 or 6 locations and do some programs for a year or 2, maybe 3. Then we'll need another 3 to 4 years to do pre and post testing. He said, it'll take us 12 to 16 years before we even get back. And he said, go somewhere else. Don't do anything. Can't do anything for you. Don't give me your bucks. I couldn't believe this, okay? I then went to Department of Education in the Department of State of Ohio under Martin Essex, worked with William T. Self, for 6 months at least, prepared her for Department of Education. Met with Dr. Martin Essex after almost a year, and he said, oh, I can't do anything for you. He said, you're preschool. Funds for Department of Education are K through 12. How can we justify this? He said, we're closing things down. How can we justify this? All right, so we're back sort of at square one, but we kept trying to do this. And in 1970, I should mention to you, when I went into Washington, I found out that the Foundation, back in the early 60s, had funded a few safety towns, one in Nassau County, to the tune of $250,000 for a 3-year program. I have this in the file, folks, okay? And I've been there. They have overhead tunnels, bridges, and underground tunnels. Their cars are $1,500 a piece. Peoria, Illinois was another one that was funded. And they were so proud. They had these, 5 or 6 or whatever that they funded. I had my files of like 32 safety towns, not one was over $1,000. And that's when I kept saying, why are you wasting this money on a few when you could be providing these books and money all over the country to these people? Why is it so difficult to understand? Okay, finally in 1979, no, it was a little bit earlier, I got a call and said, Dorothy, guess what? This had to be around 75, I guess. We stopped the funding of safety towns. And I said, fantastic, you're now going to make the safety town center. He said, no, we're going to put in bicycle safety because that was a big bicycle boom. So we lost all the money. In 79, late 79, early 79, we got approval from National Highway Traffic Safety that they were sending a letter to the governor's highway safety reps in each state that, yes, folks, you can allocate 402 funding for safety towns. Now, see, what I was trying to do is to get it out of national one blanket to make it easy. But you don't work that way because each state government has their own policies. Okay, so we worked with, the first state that we worked with was South Dakota. South Dakota funded 6 safety towns in that state at under 402 funds. And I thought, fantastic, we got a few in Michigan. We got a few here in Ohio funded under 402 funding down in the southern part of Ohio. We were so excited about this, and of course then the fundings were cut. Then in the end of 1979, because Washington had still insisted on this evaluation, actually it was early 80s, they called and he said, Dorothy, starting from 1980 to 1984, there's going to be a 4-year evaluation of safety towns. I said, great, you've wanted that? I would like to see it too. They called me a couple months later and said, we visited a safety town. Why are you teaching motorcycle safety to kids? And I said, we're not. Look at the curriculum. It doesn't teach motorcycle safety to kids. And they said, well, that's what we found out. And I had been screaming at them for years to get from behind that chair that they were making decisions about our program. I had never visited a program. I said, get from behind that chair and go out to see a safety town. So the first one they do, it's motorcycle safety. So I said, which one was it? And they told me. And I said, well, that's not, they might have gotten information indirectly, but we did not directly work with them. And they said, well, if we're going to do this evaluation, then send us a list of those safety towns that follow your curriculum, if it's an educational curriculum. And I said, well, we really don't have any way of knowing that, my thing was, like I said to Mike Lynch, in Pennsylvania, I'll come in and help you if, after you establish, you'll help another community and so forth and so on. And I said, you make the same deal. And that's really how it started as a chain gang type thing. It's called networking instead of a chain gang, I guess, to make it sound nicer. So he said, you better establish something. So folks, very quickly, within a few weeks, we had to prepare, and we had 6 attorneys around the country. A man who is now senator in Michigan, Rudy Nichols. We had Herb Hoppe, Marv Wagner, Dr. Coleman, Jim Griffith, and I can't think of the other one. But then we had 6 attorneys put together an agreement. We don't want to call it a contract. And it's a 4-page, it's not very technical. It just means that it says in there you will teach things to 4- and 5-year-olds that are appropriate, and in return what we will do for you as a parent organization and what you will do for us. Now, we had to implement what we call the Safety Town Continuing Yearly Operational Package, First Year Operational Package, because I have to tell you, as I'm sitting here, the reason that we have not had support from corporations, while we have support from Stouffer's and Prudential and Ameritrust and a few of the corporate Eckridge we did before they merged, it was minimal support from these organizations. And the reason that they have not supported us more is they could not believe that we would go out to communities and set up, and these people, after we set them up, would not do anything back in return to support an organization. They said, Dorothy, you name me one organization that doesn't pay a membership. And I didn't know Girl Scout leaders had to pay to be Girl Scout leaders. They went through Lions Clubs, they went through all these things. And they said, you name me one organization. They said, you'll never get a penny from a corporation until your own people support the organization. And I said, well, a lot of these people have been in existence, And they said, well, you're going to have to think of something, but this is ridiculous. So this is why we had to go into what is now known, and it has been since 1980, and this is where a lot of communication problems really had started, is the registered, accredited, and certified programs. And each one means something. To be accredited and certified, you must teach the 20-hour minimum, you must teach the total, you must have parent-child sessions, you must have at least 2 parent sessions. These things are all required in there. And in return, you get the bi-monthly newsletter, you get your plaque, you get your 5-year bar, you get your free program covers every year, you get your free name tags and things of that type. And as things, progress, we'll be doing more and more. But that's why we had to do that. Along with working with the National Community Education Association, I've spoken at their national conventions, and they were concerned about the educational connotation. And this is why I implemented very early, from 1965, that Safety Town have a full-time police officer and a full-time teacher. And I use the word qualified and not necessarily certified. Now, I think that's changing through the years. Things are certainly changing all the time. But many states did not recognize nursery school teachers as certified teachers. Some states still might do this. And yet those people were much more qualified to teach than teachers that had no training with kids at that age level, because you have to break down your terminology and all this kind of thing. And that's one of the requirements. Now, many communities, unfortunately, are not able to have a full-time police officer, and we encourage the use of one as much as possible. I was unhappy to hear recently Olmsted Falls, the chief I talked with, he would love to work full-time, and the organization that sponsors it said they don't need them, and that hurts, and we're going to see if we can't rectify that. We don't like to go in any communities. That's, we're there for you to call us, and we'll help you in any way, but we're not going to come in and poke our nose into your affairs. We have too much work to help new communities. And as I said, I feel badly in Greater Cleveland because when we started the programs, we did not know a lot of this. And to go back, and we don't have the staff now. I'm working, I've had meetings with Bill Bryan, President of the Growth Association, and officials from Stouffer's and other organizations. And we're going to see if we can't get some type of funding to at least have a Greater Cleveland safety coordinator to work, Safe Town coordinator, to work with these communities to get them up to date, because they're not really teaching a total part. It's not their fault. Again, I want to say it's not their fault, and I have no bad feelings. I feel sorry for these people because our concern was always to help a community get started, and we did not have the personnel to follow up, to continue to do this. I'm blessed with having, well, up until a year ago, we had about 78 state coordinators, and we really had to sort of cut the state coordinators, and now we have something like probably 300 and some coordinators, if not more. I probably left out, we acquired Bill Cosby as honorary chairman in 1976, and this is our 10th anniversary with him. And again, I was fortunate in 1982 to have been contacted by Tom Winter. His grandson went through one of our programs in Chicago, and he was the president of Children's Press, and he contacted me and said, excuse me, he said, would you be interested in writing some safety books for us? And unfortunately, he did not live to see me sign the contract. He and his wife were killed in a traffic accident. But I signed a contract for 4 books, and then another contract for 6 books, and we'll sign another one for 4 more books. And as a result of that, about a year ago, I was contacted by a sister organization of theirs, Arco Playing Card Company, and we should have had the cards out on May 15th, but again, they're behind in production, and they will be out mid-June. And they will be safe, like an all-made playing card games, and we tested these at Montessori in East Cleveland at Inner City. So we've done a lot with all of our things. We've done inner city, not inner city, but rural areas, testing with kids. But if Jackie and Gail and Adele and all of us have to stay up and work around the clock, we're going to have the new books out for you to include the up-to-date safety. A lot of it's going to be the same basic information. Remember, kids are still 4 and 5 years of age. Okay, you might be teaching them year after year, but they're not changing. They're new children every year at 4 and 5. Their muscular development, all their development is still the same. If you're getting tired of whether you're presenting it, then you either find another approach to excite yourself and motivate yourself, or you get another teacher and police officer. But don't start changing and making things more adult. Now, my very big concern is, well, a couple of concerns. Number one, the registration fees in some communities has tremendously skyrocketed. I mean, unbelievable. When I was teaching, it was $1, and when the school board raised it to $3, I screamed, and I said, no, you can't. We're going to lose the kids from Oakwood and Bedford Heights that are really, some of them were on welfare, and I said, we're going to lose those kids. We raised it, and we had an increase of attendance. And that has been proven in more communities. I don't know why that is. That almighty dollar means something. However, and we don't care what you charge, and we give you all kinds of ways on how to raise money and that type of thing. But Safety Town is the only time that child has the opportunity to cross that street as many times as possible, to get on that school bus, to get off and on the right way. That's the only time. Mom and Dad can't do that. They can't have a school bus come and show the kids how to do this. This is the only time where, that's why that curriculum is written for 98% involvement with those kids. Not just sitting there talking and having color sheets and all these game things. Sure, we have treasure chest games, but they're safety. And in our curriculum, we have a toy chest. And all the items are safety. They have a little handkerchief over the child. He feels and then gets an item out, and he has to tell, or she has to tell the group what it is. If it's a traffic light color at the top, what does it mean, and so forth. And they do this in large groups and small groups. There's reasons for all these things. But that's what Safety Town is. It's not in, and please, I have a lot. We recommend film loops, we recommend AIMS, we recommend, the AAA preschool and safety, preschool traffic and safety. By the way, I forgot to mention when I sent them the books, I sent those, our Safety Town books to them, because they said if they would even consider doing anything, they had to see what we had, so I gave them the books. And about 2 years later, Andy Miller, who was a police officer in Kent and started the Kent Safety Town program, I was in New York and he called me and he said, "Dorothy, you're not going to believe this." He said, the AAA came out with a pamphlet of books, and he said, if you look on page 29 of your curriculum, it's exact wording except they put a few words on each page. And I said, great, it's for the kids, you know, but they wouldn't do anything for the program. Now, Andy Miller was a little upset because he was called in on the AAA in Cleveland and really sort of chewed out a little bit. Because when we first started to have, as I said, in '71, we had the seminar there. And as we expanded to Akron area, the Akron AAA has been very nice. And when we expanded to include these people, I said to the Lead Automobile Club, oh, well, I would like to invite Richard Duffy, who's the manager of AAA Akron. No, he can't come, this is ours. And so then I had to go into regional seminars, and that's where they got very upset. Now, Andy did our first one in Akron for us, and he wrote to the national AAA asking for information, and word got back to the Cleveland Automobile Club, and they called Andy and Frank Beck and I in and said, what are you doing? And I said, we're expanding the Safety Town seminars. You won't allow these people to come in. And that was unfortunate. And as I said, the first year that they printed the program for us, and I have a copy, if the whole back program says AAA, it didn't say program printed by AAA, but you get the impression that they did the whole seminar by themselves. And that's unfair. But those are the things, you know, I feel because of those stumbling blocks, you have to, as people say, you have to get a thick crust each time on your skin when you encounter one of these things, and I think you have to do that. But I just feel badly recently, and I mentioned this briefly at our May 12th seminar, recently we have heard some unkind things, and that I'm not happy with, but I can tolerate that. But some of the things have been untrue. And that we won't. Okay? As I sit here before you, right in, this is my 23rd year. All my work is voluntarily done. I do not get paid. Yes, I do get paid a consulting fee. I get paid by the State Departments. I get paid by Sesame Street. I get paid for a lot of the things I do. I get my royalties from the books and from the game cards. All go to the National Safety Town Center. But I hope, I don't know, I'm sure there are a lot of things that we left out in the process, but we just wanted you to have some idea of where Safety Town started from. I'm tired of going around the country, even within Greater Cleveland. A mayor that's a very good friend of mine keeps saying, Safety Town started right here, folks, and I have sent them letters. I have sent letters to congressmen, if I've heard say, Safety Town started here. It didn't start. It started in Mansfield, Ohio, folks. Okay, I want that man to get credit for it. He came up with the idea. But by the same token, I think people should know that from 1937 to 1964, folks, there were only about 10 programs in the whole country. And I used to constantly, when I went to corporations, especially, I would tell them, they said, when Safety Town start? And I said, 1937. Do you know what they would say to me? Why are you coming around 40 years later and asking for us to support it? Which made sense. You're talking to a businessman, okay? Business people, Standard Oil, all tell me, said, you want us to support what? Safety Town? We've never even heard of it. You want us to put our name that we've established for years with something we don't even know, especially you better affiliate with that organization that went bankrupt? You gotta be kidding, folks. You know, it was, we could not even get a loan from the banks, really, because of the situation. At first when I went into National City, because I took the bus, and as I said, I was completely honest with them. And they said, oh, you were part of Highway Safety Foundation. I said, I was this program with them, and I said I had nothing to do with the administrative, which I didn't. So it has not been easy, and while we are, the program, the organization, as I said, I think it was probably the best thing. In fact, we're now complimented, and I say we, not just me, because I would not be here if it was not for the coordinators that we had around the country. As I said, Prudential had a conference for about 21 of my people, and not for 21 people. My gal from Alaska, my man from Illinois, from California, for a 3-day seminar in Cleveland. We hope to have this again in the future with some of our coordinators who have done outstanding work for us. Many of them have been with us for years and spend their own money traveling around in their states to help promote the program. They made a slide presentation for us, Prudential did. They just printed our new pamphlet they've given us. When Jackie started with me over 10 years ago, she was paid a fantastic salary, $5 for every 2 weeks. And when she needed additional money, which we felt she should have approached Prudential, and they gave us a grant for her salary, and have continued. So it's been, you know, they've been really a blessing, my godfather, to us, which has allowed us to continue. But, and so I had no intention of what we're hearing now, but I'm complimented, and we're complimented by corporate people for saying, Dorothy, it's great to see someone who had the foresight to plan to get money from selling materials rather than constantly relying on funding from the government, or because it doesn't work. Now, just so you know, all the materials that are designed, that were designed and will continue to be designed, have been requested by the teachers, the parents, or whatever. I can go down the list, everything available, why there's a reason for everything there. Why do we have the t-shirts for the instructors, okay? Some communities felt that this was a great incentive to give the teens something for volunteers. We had calls from superintendents in the early years where the instructors were coming with short shorts and see-through blouses with no bras. I had superintendents to call us and tell us about this. Please do something, okay? They were having more cars stopped. Really? They were, you know, they problems with it. Why do we have the little ID card that comes with the shirt? They asked the teens in the local community, and because a lot of these teens are 13, 14, and 15, going to be future drivers, this was like a driver's card, the same size as an adult MasterCard, whatever. The same thing with the keychain. Why do we have the keychain? They're going to get through cars. Everybody, you know, everybody has a car keychain type thing. We did first the red ones, and people said, well, could you do something nice that we could give to the police chief or to the editor of the newspaper? So we came out with the gold ones. The graduation, everything, there's a reason for doing everything, and the materials are only sold to the Safety Town communities. And many of the programs, that's their main source of income. Because you can add on, we don't care if you add on, really for the shirts, there's no reason you shouldn't add on $2 for the shirts. Because if people call up, and many of them do, even if, you know, some communities say, we don't have time to mess with, the teacher and police officers shouldn't do this. This is where it's community involvement. You can get a teen, you can get 2 teens, you can get college students, you can get parents. On the first day, just have all the items there to display to them. You can sell them on graduation day, whatever days you want to. Every day, it doesn't matter to us. But make them available to the parents. They're not available to the stores. And then these parents have to call in. They have to pay shipping charges. And UPS, we always said at UPS to have some verification. That's a tremendous charge. And people talk to other people. We've had people call and say, my sister's kid went through a program in Webster's Grove, Missouri, and how come they had a 6-time game and we, you know, why can't I have one?